True story, the Christmas Truce of 1914. During World War I, German and British soldiers laid down their arms on Christmas Eve to sing carols and play soccer together in no man's land. Imagine this. It's 1914. The world is engulfed in the chaos of the Great War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality. Millions of young men are dug into a vast, muddy network of trenches stretching across Europe. They face each other across a desolate, crater-pocked strip of land known as no man's land. Life here is a grim cycle of fear, boredom, and sudden violent death. The roar of artillery and the crack of rifles are the constant soundtrack to their existence. Hope is a scarce commodity. But as winter tightens its icy grip on the Western Front, something truly extraordinary is about to happen. Something that defies the logic of war and reminds us of the enduring power of the human spirit. This is the true story of the Christmas truce, a moment when enemies became friends and a glimmer of peace shone through the darkest of times. By December 1914, the war, which many believed would be over by Christmas, had settled into a brutal stalemate. Soldiers on both sides, the British and their allies on one, the Germans on the other, were exhausted, homesick, and disillusioned. They were living in freezing, waterlogged trenches, often just a few hundred feet from their enemies. The initial patriotic fervor had long since faded, replaced by the grim reality of industrial warfare. As Christmas Eve approached, a strange and wonderful thing began to unfold. It started subtly, in pockets along the front lines. In one sector, German soldiers began to place small Christmas trees, or Tannenbäume, complete with lit candles, on the parapets of their trenches. A surreal and beautiful sight against the grim backdrop of war. Then, a sound drifted across the frozen mud of no man's land. Not the sound of gunfire, but of singing. The German soldiers began to sing Christmas carols, familiar tunes like Stille Nacht, Silent Night. After a moment of hesitation, the British soldiers responded. They sang their own carols back across the divide. A call and response of festive songs, a musical dialogue replacing the usual exchange of bullets. From the German lines, brave soldiers started to call out in broken English, "Tommy, Fritz, Merry Christmas! We no shoot, you no shoot." Cautiously, heads began to pop up over the top of the trenches. Soldiers who had been trying to kill each other just hours before were now looking at each other, not as targets, but as fellow human beings. One by one, then in small groups, soldiers from both sides climbed out of their trenches and walked into no man's land. They met in the middle, shaking hands, sharing what little they had, cigarettes, chocolate, buttons from their uniforms as souvenirs. They showed each other pictures of their families, wives and children back home. For a brief, magical period, they weren't soldiers. They were just men far from home, sharing a common longing for peace and home on Christmas Day. Imagine the scene, a landscape scarred by shellfire, littered with the grim remnants of battle, now filled with men laughing, talking, and sharing gifts. The language barrier was overcome with gestures and goodwill. A German soldier, who had been a barber in London before the war, gave haircuts to his British counterparts. They helped each other bury their fallen comrades who had lain in no man's land for weeks, affording them a dignified burial with joint services And then came the most famous part of the truce, the football match. Accounts from soldiers' letters and diaries describe impromptu games of soccer breaking out, using makeshift balls, perhaps a bundle of rags or an empty tin can. These men played with a joy and abandon that had been absent for months. For a few hours, the muddy, blood-soaked ground between the trenches became a football pitch. German Fritz against British Tommy, not with rifles, but with a ball. There were no official scores kept, no referees, no winners or losers in the traditional sense. In this game, everyone won. They won a moment of normalcy, a taste of the life they had left behind. One British soldier, a Staff Sergeant Clement Barker of the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, wrote home to his brother. A German looked over the trench, no shots. Our men did the same, and then a few of our men went out and brought in some of their wounded, and the Germans came out to help. And so it went on. We had a sort of armistice, and we had a football match with them. It was a strange and wonderful sight. These moments were not an isolated incident. The truce spread organically along significant portions of the Western Front, particularly in the British-German sectors. It wasn't an officially sanctioned event. In fact, High Command on both sides was furious when they heard about it. Generals saw it as a breakdown of military discipline, a dangerous fraternization with the enemy that could undermine the will to fight. Orders were quickly issued to put a stop to any such truces. The generals feared that if soldiers saw their enemies as human beings, they would be less willing to kill them. And so the pressure came from the top to resume hostilities. The war had to go on. As Christmas Day drew to a close and Boxing Day dawned, the soldiers reluctantly returned to their trenches. In some places, the truce ended with a simple handshake and a promise to see you on the other side. In others, a single symbolic shot was fired into the air to signal that the war was back on. The magical spell was broken. The sounds of carols were once again replaced by the thunder of artillery. The men who had shared laughter and a football game were, once again, ordered to kill each other. Many found it incredibly difficult. One soldier wrote, "I couldn't have fired at any of them that day after what had happened." The truce had revealed a truth that the architects of war tried desperately to conceal, that the men on the other side were not monsters, but people just like them. The Christmas truce of 1914 was never repeated on such a scale. Military leaders made sure of that. As the war dragged on and the casualties mounted into the millions, the bitterness and hatred grew, making such an event unthinkable in the years that followed. The story was suppressed for a time, deemed bad for morale and the war effort, but it was never forgotten. The story lived on in the letters and diaries of the soldiers who were there. It's a testament to the fact that even in the most inhumane of circumstances, our shared humanity can find a way to shine through. It reminds us that peace is not just the absence of war, but an active choice, a connection made between people. The Christmas truce serves as a powerful and poignant question for all of us. Why did they have to go back to fighting? It highlights the profound tragedy of war, where ordinary people with no personal quarrel are forced into conflict by forces far beyond their control. Today, The story of the 1914 Christmas truce is remembered and celebrated as a symbol of peace and hope. It's a powerful lesson from history that the bonds that unite us as human beings are stronger than the divisions that are forced upon us. It's a story that reminds us, especially during the festive season, to look for the humanity in others, to choose connection over conflict, and to hold on to hope, even in the darkest of times. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as moving as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more incredible stories from history. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and never forget the lessons of the past.